Welcome back to Jay Talking. In today's episode, we'll be exploring the dynamics of group play versus solo play in Star Citizen. Joining us again is my good friend Havoc, co-founder, senior director at Atlas Defense Industries. He will provide his perspective on the benefits and challenges of each playstyle and how they complement the game's overall design. Havoc, how are you doing today?
Doing good. How are you, Jay?
I'm doing great. Let's talk about group play versus solo play in Star Citizen. Do you prefer group play or solo play, and why?
Oh, I absolutely prefer group play. It's a much better experience with a group of people than it is just being solo.
Being solo, there's so many bugs in Star Citizen. Being solo is a suicide pact with the Kraken,
Yeah.
basically. From your perspective, what are the main benefits of playing in a group?
Uh, Essentially, with the main benefits are you can pretty much get all of the equipment that you need for a group operation, for example. You can get all of the necessary basics in order to prevent yourself from having to respawn from the very beginning. So the way I see it is group play allows you to get a huge box full of whatever things you need in it, whatever equipment that you need, put it onto a ship, get a whole bunch of guys equipped and loaded to the gills, get a couple ships, mostly like, a troop carrier ship, and then, a couple of fighters that can provide support. And then going to a location and just doing whatever type of operations that you want to do, whether you're going out and killing outlaws or you're going out and killing a whole bunch of NPCs and taking all of the gear off of them, putting them in boxes, and then taking them to your ship. So the benefit to that is you can have a ship that can respawn you, for example, and say you die inside of a distribution center, but you have a whole bunch of stuff on your person, or there's a whole bunch of other loot. You're no longer just sent back to square one, back into a landing zone. You're now respawning on board a ship. The group that you're with can gather all your stuff, make sure it's ready to go for when you get back to your body, equip yourself with all the things that you need again, and get back to the mission. I think that that's the single biggest benefit with playing with a group of people versus solo. And even if the bugs didn't exist, that would still be the preferred approach, because you're ultimately gonna, if you die, you're gonna go back to square one. And I think that if 4.0 was to deliver a whole bunch of bug fixes and provide a fairly polished, I guess maybe not polished, but a fairly cohesive experience that's stable for the most part, you're still not going to want to fly solo. I think the preferred route's going to be group altogether. Like, that's what I would want, and I would recommend to everybody else that they play with groups of people or friends.
I don't ever play alone anymore. I've had too many mistakes. I think the big thing that you might have overlooked from my perspective is you get shot in that distribution center. You've got a buddy next to you that can res you or bring you back to life instead of you having to respawn back at the ship. I mean, that's the bigger issue, and somebody to cover your back. From my perspective, that's the big benefit, is that I don't even have that respawn, whether it's at a ship or back at a station. I'm back up. I might be wounded. I might have some issues, but at least I'm back in the fight and we're able to continue mission instead of having to pause, fly back out there, or respawn at your ship and then, make it back with just a pistol to your gear kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what specific aspects of gameplay are really enhanced? Give us some examples of things where you really just, you need a group. And you know, the first thing that would come to my mind is the recent Xenothreat Overdrive missions.
Oh yeah.
But you know, so talk about that and any other, use a couple other examples of places where you think group play is the only way to go.
Well, as you said, Xenothreat absolutely number one, especially when especially since they added boarding and interest to that part of the event. Obviously, it was a little bit broken and the servers were
A
melting,
mess.
but even when you get on board, I got on board 3 or 4 times. I was alone. I was playing solo during that time. And I can honestly say that that was the most miserable experience ever. I got on board and I did fairly well, but I, methodically cleared every single corner and every single level before continuing on to the next one. And it was like I was running out of ammo. I was having to grab uh, magazines from dead bodies that I killed. I had to grab several different types of weapons because they no longer had the same type of ammo that I was using before because they had, you know, the guys on the lower level had a bunch of like ballistic magazines for like a P4, and the guys on the next level had magazines for a Gallant. I'm like, dude, what am I doing here? So I did that 3 or 4 times, and I'm just like, this is insane. This event, even though the server was quite a bit of a slideshow in some ways, like my performance was okay. It was a good 30 frames per second on the high end, and on the low end was probably about 22 or something like that. So it wasn't terrible. But it was definitely one of those things that was very time consuming and very challenging to do that by yourself. So I would say that Xenothreat number one. Eventually, when they add the blockade runner, that's going to be another one that you're really not going to want to play alone because you're going to need people to cover you if you're a cargo ship, for example, trying to run the blockade and get into the freight the hangars. Siege of Orison is a prime
Oh
example.
my God. Yeah. You
Yeah.
don't want to go into siege by yourself. That's a way to lose a lot of equipment and
Yeah.
get butt hurt big time.
Your likelihood of getting revived by somebody who's passing by is nil, unless Jay's around, and Jay's accepting every single contract to revive said people.
Hey, I wasn't by myself. I was with a
No,
four-man team and we were in a
absolutely.
P, we were in a C8 flying around rescuing people.
Yep. Yep. But
It's a good
that's
way to recruit, by the way.
yeah,
Um,
and that like as the medical gameplay evolves over time as well, that'll be pretty essential, and especially with the player beacon system eventually getting reworked and having like player missions and whatnot. But you know, big dynamic missions like that, and I'm going to say it, that 4.0, you are not going to want to go to Pyro alone. It's going to
no.
behoove you to take a group of people. Otherwise, you are going to be sorely hurting at the very end of it.
Well, and I would go a little farther. I go back to Overdrive, Xenothreat Overdrive 4, the 4.1
Oh,
and
yeah.
4.2, where we, had this huge group of players that were, came in, we set up a cap, we were able to drop Marines off and have them go in and clear the satellite and get that free. And then we had to jump to SPK and we landed 30 plus infantry on SPK while we still had 30 guys outside protecting it
Yeah.
in space. And I remember the running battles that we had in during that time inside of SPK with the AI. I mean, it was at some point, I'll have to release a video that I took of it, but it was, we'd push up, we'd start to engage them, we'd drop some of them, and you'd run out of ammo. And so then you'd pull back around a corner, start pulling mags out of your backpack and slapping them back on. And then you come back around the corner and they've respawned on you.
Yeah.
And it was a good 15 minutes, maybe 20 that we were in a all out fight on all three levels with 30 plus Marines, just in a firefight, taking wounded, getting them back up, and dealing with just the constant flow of enemy infantry coming out of the spawn closets.
Yeah.
And I can't even comprehend how you would do that if you were by yourself.
Yeah. And that's, that tells a really interesting story as well that you mentioned, in that all happened even without server meshing, and just how chaotic that was. Let's say they cranked up the difficulty of the AI. Who cares? Just you know to null the effects of the server FPS being extremely low at that time. But that was during 3.22, and that
Yep.
was, even if the patches haven't been stable, that was a pretty, I remember that
It was
very
stable.
vividly. That was
It was
very
stable.
stable considering, we've come from 2.0
3.6,
through,
where we
yeah.
couldn't even quantum
Oh
reliably.
yeah. Yeah. Freaking
Party quantum was
2.0.
busted for a year.
Yeah. That all sorts of different patches that had issues. But people complain that keeps these issues keep happening, but things are progressively getting better. Like, you can tell more things are being added, and the more that they add things, yeah, the more things that break. But I remember that experience just being like one of the most chaotic but also fulfilling moments, because it showed the potential of the game when we get to the certain points that we need to see. So yeah,
So
I would not have wanted to do that alone, or even,
with
not
4
in
or
a
5
group.
guys, yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's rough going into some of those fights if you don't. I mean, Siege of Orison, 6 guys can kick butt. 4
Yeah.
guys can kind of make it as long as you don't take too many casualties. But you
Well,
go
right now,
into
yeah.
if you go into SPK, you better bring 10 or 12 if
Yeah.
you want to get out of there alive between PvP and the NPCs.
Yeah. And I'm really curious to see, the it Siege of Orison, you mentioned that you could do that with like 4 or 6 people, but I'm interested to see what that's going to be like, when server meshing happens. I think
And
it's
the
going to get
AI is actually
drastically,
dangerous.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's going to get drastically more difficult.
yeah. Well, I mean, some of it is limiting. You really can't go
Yeah.
in group sizes more than 6 because you can't fit more than 6 in an elevator.
Yeah.
And so your largest maneuver team is going to be 4 to 6 players in that environment. Um, and so, you've got to, at least the initial sweep and fight, you're going to be 6 of you. Now, there may be multiple groups of 6 so that you're taking multiple targets at the same time. But I don't see you can't go in as an 8 or a 12 and there doesn't buy you anything unless you split up,
Yeah. I
in
think
my
they're going to
opinion.
have to, kind of add a bit more to Siege of Orison in order to really make that dynamic mission work even more and work better than it was.
I completely disagree. I have been on servers with high NPC FPS and they're bleeping Navy SEALs. I mean, you get on a server that has high FPS and you don't have a silenced weapon and a 4-man fire team gets overrun
Yeah.
repeatedly. My wife and Turin and one other guy were in a 4-man fire team and we didn't have suppressed weapons, and we got in and we took a casualty, and then while we were healing that person and trying to get them up, we got hit by 3 other NPCs. They were maneuvering and getting behind boxes, and it was everything we could do to stay up and move back to regroup.
Yeah.
They hit us so hard. So, and
So
that was a year ago AI. The new AI is even scarier
yeah.
when it has enough cycles to run.
So I don't mean primarily with the AI. I primarily mean with like the way the level is set up. So you're talking about the points in
Oh
the
yeah,
elevator. A lot of those choke points need to be figured out so we can have multiple different routes that go to these locations.
I
Because right
agree.
now, as it is, let's say we drop into Solanke and we have to go up to that one singular elevator in order to get to
Yes.
the upper floor
Every
to get to
player
all
has
the
to
other
go through
buildings,
that one
every
set.
single one of them. Yeah.
Yep, and it takes
So
forever.
yeah,
When we
that
bring a
one,
40-man team, it takes us an hour to
yeah,
clear Solinki because we're trying to get through that elevator.
that elevator is a an Achilles heel. So they'll have to,
They
as the
need to add steps or
yeah,
something.
they'll have to figure out a solution for that in some way in order to make Siege of Orison that much better. Because right now it's pretty great, but they do have to make it even better to make it worthwhile for all sorts of different groups when that event pops. And I hope that eventually it'll get to a point where those events will pop based on the like where what everybody's doing on a server so that we can trigger them ourselves at some point. So we do a whole bunch of like different different side missions, and then that keys up the Xeno threat invasion and all these
Yep.
different guys, or Ninetales gang goes to Orison and just starts causing havoc, and same with Xeno threat.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, as a leader in the org, what are some of the challenges that come with coordinating large group activities like that?
Oh man, uh, getting everybody in the same Discord. I think, especially if everybody's not, um, if there are people that aren't necessarily like well oriented inside the org as it is. When you have a whole bunch of new players join, for example. But I think getting everybody outfitted with all of the equipment that they need to be effective, like tractor beams, firearms, ammo, armor, the right type of armor, so that you're positively identifying each other when you go around corners,
Yes.
and not some multicolored yellow, red, blue, purple, green.
Oh, no, no, no. That at least is maybe not that bad. It's the guy that picks up the heavy Ninetales armor and throws it on.
That too, and then you
You
look like a
know,
Ninetales sympathizer. But
yep, yep. And it's like, because the blueberries help, but there's times you're in such a hard fight that you're just looking at moving in armor. It's like, oh, that's Ninetales armor. Pop, pop, pop.
yep,
Oh crap! I just shot a friendly.
yeah.
Um,
And then for whatever reason, you're the Ninetales sympathizer because you shot somebody wearing Ninetales armor. That's
yes,
I think that they'll have to
that's
figure that
they
out.
they got to do something better about that. I agree. They've
Yeah,
got to identify that armor in such a way that when you put it on, it turns you into a sympathizer or something, or
yeah,
takes away your blueberry.
yep.
Um, so for solo players, what are some of the strategies or roles or activities that you can be successful at in your mind today?
In my right now, I'd say as a solo player, if you're just going to be doing stuff for yourself, it's going to be a lot of um, taking bounties, solo mining in a prospector, um, solo salvaging in a vulture. I mean, let's be honest and say that once the resource management network and the full-on engineering gameplay is in, you aren't going to be grabbing a reclaimer and playing by yourself.
Only if
And
you have a suicide,
yeah,
a death wish. Yeah.
you might be able to hire NPC blades at some point to operate the turrets in your ship, but you'll have to do all of the moving of the crates, all of the pulling it out of um, your fabricators and whatnot, and moving all the boxes. You won't be able to do this by yourself.
And
And
then you drop a 16 SCU box on your head and can't get out from under it because you're knocked out.
yeah, and I think the reclaimer that's another story in itself. Is just it's going to need some reworking so that it's more functional with the new updates that they made for cargo. But yeah, a lot of these things you're not going to be able to do. If you have a really like kitted out ship, you might be able to do an ERT, but you're not going to be able to do group ERTs. You're not going to be able to do group mining activities that with really large ships. You know, if you think that you're going to take an Arastra out and mine a whole bunch of stuff, or your Orion,
It's not going to happen.
it's
Uh,
going to be the biggest challenge of your life, and you will be miserable and never want to do it ever again, because there's a lot of these different systems that they are developing behind the scenes that they will develop eventually that will drastically change how we see these large ships. And right now it might be, you know, the bigger the better. That's the go-to. But eventually it's going to be every single ship has a purpose. So smaller ships, that's you doing solo stuff. But really large ships, you're going to want a crew for that. And I know that it will hurt a lot of people's feelings when they do implement that, but I think it's that's for the better. I think it's really going to be all about getting a group together and playing with people, because that the game's pretty boring playing it by yourself. It's so much better with people.
I
It's
agree.
so much more better,
But
more better.
do you think CIG is going to do anything to ensure that solo players aren't at a huge disadvantage?
To some level, yeah. I think that they will make true on their promise of giving people the ability to hire NPC crews, but you know, they'll be able to stack boxes and move boxes around.
Maybe.
Maybe, yeah. They'll be able to pull out the boxes out of the fabricator and eventually at some point, and operate the the scrapers on a reclaimer, for example, but they're not going to do it as efficiently and as effectively as what a human player would. Like a human player can dynamically think about what the best approach for scraping a hole or fracturing a rock, and he can also respond to your inputs as well quickly by you saying, okay, draw back your power. Whereas like, you know, the AI is going to do it a little bit slower, and you know, you'll largely control it if you were mining, for example, in a mole, because as you adjust your frequency, they'll probably adjust their frequency as well. But it's not going to be near as good as if you have a full group of
No.
real people.
And
It'll
you're,
be effective, but it not to the level of what a human player can.
well, and I think the big advantages are not what you can do in a single ship. It's what a group of ships can do together that are doing different things. I mean, we're
Yeah,
already looking from that perspective, you know, of very soon having fleets of miners, both prospectors and moles out, and having to support tender ships to pull their bags off so they can stay on station longer. And I think
yeah,
that's where your profit margin comes from is right now, if you're in a mole, you have to go out in half to two-thirds of your time is spent flying to and from and finding the stuff to mine.
yeah.
And if you could stay on target and not have to leave, it would drastically increase the amount of UEC you make per hour.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. I don't think that they're going to ever get to a level of being able to have multiple ships that you own operated at the same time. I think it's going to
No.
be you're going to have one, and it's going to be you in it, and you're going to be able to tell the AI kind of like rudimentarily what they're going to do. Like, hey, you're going to handle this, you're going to handle this, you're going to handle this. You're the engineer. Like, give them roles essentially, and then they'll automatically know, okay, well, I know how to handle all of this stuff that I need to do. But there are I've read a few things on Spectrum, and there are people that are looking forward to the day that they're going to be able to get 3, 4, 5 of their ships and do a whole bunch of like operations with their entire fleet of ships with
Nothing but AI.
purely AI. And I'm like, dude, you are
Smoking the
you
crack pipe. Put the crack pipe down, please. Back
put it
away.
down, dude.
So, on that
That's
mark,
that's not gonna happen.
what advice would you give to new players about choosing between solo and group play?
I'd say if you're really good, just gonna play by yourself, choose a smaller ship. It's gonna be, you know, if you want to get a Cutlass Red so you can respawn, sure, fine. But
But how are you going to carry cargo and have a Cutlass Red?
you'll have at some point they'll have AI blades that they'll be able to just operate the turret, and then they will be doing everything else. But that still takes away from, having a pilot that can get out of dodge instantly.
Well, and again, the question was choosing between solo and group play. What
Yeah,
would be your advice? Which one should they pick?
I I am a big proponent in saying that, in recommending to everybody that plays the game, that you should play with a group of people. You should find an org. Um, and honestly, if you have a group of people already, group of friends, you should all join the same org that's larger. And you really should not be part of, like, I get the allure to, like, well, I just want like my 5 closest friends in our own little org that we can say we're the Arc Corp security financiers, or like, yeah, what, we're the traders of Pyro 13, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Just they like, I get the allure of wanting to have your own name, of your own ragtag group of guys, but you can have a ragtag group of smugglers that operate well together, but you'll be able to do these small, your scope is going to be small, much smaller than if you were to join a large group. And if you think about it, just like real life, you get 5, 6 guys together to create a business, and you have these mega corporations out doing other things, or you're just like, I'm just scratching the surface over here by my, you know, just barely making gains in, let's say, for trading for example, like your 6 guys are smart and you're making money, but the mega corporations are over there, hand over fist.
Yeah, we got a little bit of feedback on that.
Garage door opener, sorry.
Oh, okay. That's fine. We can fix it in post. Okay. I completely agree with you on that. But, for new players, what would be your advice for how to get involved in group activities? You're brand new to Star Citizen. Because I'm with you. You're in a group with 5 guys. You're lucky if you play 1 or 2 nights a week. You get 4 to 6 hours of gameplay a week. Best case scenario in a 5-man org.
Yeah.
In group play. So let's say that that's not the right answer, and let's say solo play, because this is a big hard sim to learn. What is the advice you'd give to new players on how to get involved in group activities? What are the options?
Yeah. The options basically are, you get connected through the guide system, use the guide system, or look for an organization that is, something that you want to do in the game. You can narrow down the list if you're looking to just primarily do outlaw operations, or if you're trying to do law abiding type of missions and whatnot. And you can pretty much find the type of group that you want to play with by utilizing the organization system that will hopefully at some point in the future be integrated into the game, so it won't take people out of that. So that way in the future we can actively recruit people in game rather than just on a website, for example, right now. But you can do the guide system to get connected to people. You can just look up organizations that have similar values and a vision as you, or game type of gameplay focus that you want to have primarily.
And here I am going to be the singly focused crazy person and say it's really simple. Go to adiclan.com.
Yes.
You know,
Absolutely.
just or no, that's not the new URL. ADI.sc.
Is that?
ADI.sc. That's the URL you want to go to.
Hell yeah.
Check it out, and you know, it's the best org in the game.
Absolutely. Yeah. It basically, if people are trying to find an org to get connected with, that is going to be, you're looking for lawful operations or lawful missions, and you just want a organization that is dedicated to doing things the right way and like big scope and more of a
Constantly
casual,
active.
yeah,
You
constantly
know,
active, and
lots
just
going on.
does
You
not have
know,
the mentality of like, well, we need you on for this time. Like, let's be honest, people have real lives.
yeah.
The only answer, if you have a real life and value your real life, is ADI.sc,
Yep.
because ADI is, I like I said, I've been with the org since the very beginning, and you and I created it for a purpose, and it has done very well, and
And we haven't
it's got a
seen
lot of
nothing yet.
smart people and a lot of great people in it for sure.
But
We
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 haven't.
haven't seen anything yet. No.
Yeah. And we're just getting started. Okay. Well, I want to thank Havoc. And I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of J Talking. A big thank you to Havoc for sharing his thoughts on group play versus solo play in Star Citizen. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest content. Join us next week for another deep dive into the Star Citizen universe. Fly safe and see you in the verse.